Today we're going to take a look at Mosaic Russian Stitch. Now this is a stitch that uses a technique called mosaic knitting or slip stitch knitting, and with that you can work two colors to make a really interesting pattern without having to work a stranded technique like Fair Isle. It just uses slip stitches. It's really easy. You can see there's no stranding on the back, and I'm going to walk you through this stitch step by step right now. So I've got my swatch already begun, and I'm ready to work row 1 of our pattern. So row 1, which is a right side row, I'm going to use my gray yarn here, and that begins with a knit 4. So I'm just going to knit these as I normally would, and then the pattern repeat begins. I'm going to knit 3, then I come to the first slip stitch, which is slip 1 with yarn in back. So I'm continuing to keep my yarn in the back as you do when you knit, and I'm going to slip the next stitch onto the right hand needle without knitting it, and I'm going to slip it purlwise, which means I'm inserting the stitch, the needle from right to left into that stitch. Then I'm going to knit 1. And that's the repeat. So we're going to do that to the last 3 stitches. So knit 3, slip 1 with yarn and back, and then knit 1. Then for my last 3 stitches, I'm just going to knit 3. And that's just my border. And there is my row 1 complete. So row 2 uses the same color. So I'm going to knit back with the gray, and this is a wrong side row. I'm going to begin that row with a knit 3 as well. Then my pattern repeat begins. My pattern repeat is purl 1, slip 1 with yarn in front, purl 3. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front like you do when you purl, and I'm going to purl my next stitch. Then I'm going to slip 1 with yarn in front. So we're doing the same thing we did on the front of the work, on the right side of the work, but we're going to slip that stitch purlwise again, but keeping our yarn in the front of the work. And then I'm going to purl 3. So on this wrong side row, it's really easy to know which stitch you need to slip because it's that contrast color stitch that we slipped on the previous row. So I'm going to repeat that, purl 1, slip the next stitch with my yarn in the front of the work, then purl 3. I'm repeating that until I get to the last 4 stitches. I'm going to purl 1 and knit 3. So the knit 3, the first and last 3 stitches are just border stitches. There we go. So that's row 1 and row 2 complete. And now we're going to change colors. So I'm going to switch to my yellow yarn here, and you don't need to cut when you change your colors because we're only working 2 rows of each color. It actually, you can carry it up the side, and you can see here, this is where the yarns are carried up along the side, and it's really not very noticeable. It blends in. There's the other side of the work for comparison. It's really quite neat. Okay, so now we're going to work our 3rd row, which is a right side row, and we're using our yellow yarn. And this begins again with a knit 3. So holding the yarn in back, knitting the 3 stitches as usual. Then I'm going to slip 1 with yarn in back. So just as before, continuing to keep the yarn held in the back of the work. slip the next stitch purlwise. Then my pattern repeat begins. Knit 4, slip 1 with yarn and back. So knit my next 4 stitches. On the next stitch, I'm going to slip with my yarn held in back, slipping it purlwise. And I'm going to do that again until I get to the last 3 stitches. So knit 4, and slip 1 with the yarn held in back, and then knit 3 for my border. Okay, so now the 4th row, I'm going to turn my work to the wrong side row. I'm going to knit back again with the yellow, and you can see how nicely this works when we're doing 2 rows of each color. If I wanted to work this row with gray, I would have to cut the yarn, and I'd have to start it again over here, and you'd have all kinds of ends. But because you're always with the 2 rows, you can carry it up the side nice and neatly. 2 rows in each color. Okay, so now we're going to work our 4th row. That begins with a knit 3. Then I'm going to slip 1 with yarn in front. And again, all the wrong side rows, it's really easy to know which stitch you have to slip because it's your contrast color yarn. So I'm going to slip this, but don't forget to bring your yarn to the front of your work, and then slip that stitch purlwise. Then I'm going to knit 4. So I have to bring my yarn to the back again, and knit 4 stitches. So that's my pattern repeat. I'm going to slip 1 with the yarn in the front of my work, slip that contrast gray stitch, then bring the yarn to the back and knit 4. So I'm repeating that to my last 4 stitches. Then I'm going to slip 1 with yarn in front, bringing my yarn to the front, slipping the next stitch purlwise, and then knit 3, my border stitches. Okay, so there I have 4 rows of our pattern complete. For our 5th row, we're going to start with our gray yarn again, and knit 4, then I'm going to slip 1 with yarn and back, slipping purlwise, and knit 4. So that's the pattern repeat. Slip 1 with yarn and back, and then knit 4. We're going to repeat that until we get to the last 3 stitches, and then knit 3 for the border. There we go, and now we're going to turn our work for the 6th row. Continuing to work with the gray yarn, I'm going to knit 3. It's my border. Then I'm going to bring the yarn to the front because I'm going to purl now. I'm going to purl 4, slip 1 with yarn in front. That's the pattern repeat. So purl 4 stitches. And keeping the yarn in the front, I'm going to slip the next stitch. And again, really easy to remember, it's the contrast color one that you're going to slip, and keep your yarn in the front. So purl 4. Slip the next stitch purlwise with yarn in front. And I'm repeating that to the last 4 stitches. Purl 1. And then bring my yarn to the back again, to knit my 3 border stitches. Now the 7th and 8th rows of this pattern are going to work exactly the same as the 3rd and 4th rows of our pattern, but with the yellow yarn. And that's all there is to it. Really, all you need to know is how to slip your stitches, and it's really easy. I'm just going to begin in the next row to review. The 7th row is as the 3rd row, which is knit 3 and then slip 1 with yarn and back. So remember, every time you slip, to mind the pattern where it says to slip with yarn and back or yarn in front. I'm keeping my yarn in back, and remember to always slip purlwise for this particular pattern. And slipping purlwise ensures that your stitch is going to sit on the needle in the right way. If you slip knitwise, it will twist the stitch, which sometimes you want to do for certain stitch patterns, but not for this one. We want to keep it slipped purlwise. And that's all you need to know to work this really interesting 2-color stitch without Fair Isle or Intarsia or any of those fancy techniques. You can get a really great looking 2-color swatch.